Hey, welcome to this first animation speed run. So this is a new series that I'm starting where basically I give myself the challenge of creating an animation in 30 minutes or less. So basically what I'm going to do is start an animation from beginning to end and see basically how far I can get within 30 minutes. And at the end of the 30 minutes, I have to step away and call it good. It kind of doesn't matter where the animation is at that point. I have to stop once I hit 30 minutes. So doing these animation speed runs, hopefully you'll be able to see my workflow and how I approach various types of animation. Something I always found really helpful when I was learning animation, and even now, just watching someone else animate and seeing how they approach an animation and kind of get an understanding of their workflow. And maybe you can even take some of the things that they do and put it into your own workflow. Now, obviously the animations that we're going to be creating in these animation speedruns are going to be pretty short, kind of bite-sized animations, the type of animation that you can actually get to a decent level within 30 minutes. These are obviously not going to be, 2-character fight scenes and that kind of thing. We're going to keep things simple, probably just around a second or two at max, so that we can at least get the animation into a halfway decent state. So I really have no idea how this animation is going to turn out. Hopefully it turns out okay. But again, after the 30 minutes is up, I'm going to have to kind of just be happy with where it's at and call it done. So what we're actually going to be creating in this video is an idle turn in place. These are the type of animations you're going to see all the time, and I'm probably going to have to create a lot of these if you're working in the game industry. These are the type of animations where basically a character, whether it's like a creature you're fighting against, has to turn and kind of redirect and change their position. So that's where these idle turn in places come into play. So you'll typically have like a 45, a 90, a 135, and 180 degree turn where the character is more or less kind of standing in place and turning these directions. So this is the animation that we're going to create, and we're going to be doing it on this iRex dinosaur rig. Now I've kind of cheated just a little bit because I already have this idle pose in here. This is the pose that we're going to be starting and ending in. So technically I've given myself a bit of an advantage here because I'm not actually going to have to go through and actually pose out this first pose of the animation. But again, if you're working in the games industry, something like this idle pose is going to be created well before you ever go into creating any of these type of turn animations. So this is realistic in a sense that if you were to create an animation like this, you would already have an idle pose ready to go that you'd be animating with. So with that, let's go ahead and start this animation. I'm going to go ahead and start the clock, and we're going to begin animating this turn. And we're actually going to create a 90-degree turn for this animation. So the first thing that I'm going to do is select this main master control, which moves the entire character. And I'm going to jump forward, and let's say maybe around frame 35, the character is going to turn completely 90 degrees toward their left direction. All right, we can play this here. So we just have a very simple rotation happening on this transition here. So very simple. Obviously, we need to kind of spice things up and add a bit more interest. And the first thing that I always think about when I'm creating an animation is I want to nail down and figure out what my timing and what my spacing is, and think about kind of the tempo and how we can incorporate some fast and slow actions to this animation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump forward, and let's go to frame 11, and I'm going to kind of ease into this transition, kind of favor the original position it was in, because I want to think about how this creature would actually turn. And when this creature actually turns, it's probably going to lead with the head more. So at this position, I know I want to have the head kind of leading this action. So I'm going to kind of ease into it. It's not going to be turned quite as much at frame 11. I'll probably start adding a bit of tilt to this to get a bit more rotation in there. Something like that. Looks okay. Maybe dial that back a little bit. Maybe rotate down just slightly. And then here, maybe I'll quickly snap over here. So it swings around. Maybe I'll raise the rotation up just a little bit. It's going to settle back down. Again, I'm already adjusting the timing of where I'm ending up on this. So obviously that's not quite working, and we're getting some weird gimbal lock. So I'm going to go to my graph editor, drag this over so you guys can see it. Fix some of that gimbal lock there. This is happening way too fast. So I'm going to ease in to this a bit more. Probably add a bit of time and maybe reduce some of that rotation that's happening there. I want to dial back the amount of rotation that I'm getting right here. And oftentimes the way that I approach an animation like this and how I like to animate is almost thinking about it just kind of like trial and error. I'm trying different things. I'm tweaking my timing. I'm tweaking my spacing until I get something that I feel like is closer to kind of what I imagine, at least for this action in my head here, of kind of what I want it to do. Way too much kind of just weird random jiggle, and we're getting some bad gimbal lock in this, but that's fine. Really, I'm using this master control to just figure out the overall motion that I want for this. Let me actually open up Graph Editor, see if I can fix any of this. You can see we're getting some weird gimbal lock there, so that might have helped fix some of that. It's definitely looking a bit better. So this quick spin over is too fast. I kind of like that feeling of the slow turn at the beginning to like a snappy turn at the end, but it's just way too snappy. We still want to make sure this character has at least some weight to them for this. So maybe I'll just grab all these keyframes, shift them over a couple frames. And then here, maybe I'll actually rotate up. And then here, maybe start to settle it, rotate it down. I'm also going to think about translation on this action. So I'm going to go in here and start translating a bit here. I might actually translate down slightly. Actually might be too much. Continue that translation down here. Then maybe starts to stand up a bit higher. Here, then drops down. Stands back up. Something like that. All right, that's looking okay. The quick snap right here. Let me see. It's not quite working. Still too fast, so I'm going to add a few frames to this. Also going to add for some frames to my timeline so I can kind of see what I'm doing there. All right, that's looking decent timing wise. What I want to do now is looking at this, especially from the top view, the movement that I'm creating is not exactly what I want, because what we're getting is the pivot point is kind of right above the character's hips. So when we turn, the character is kind of just turning directly around their hips, which feels a little bit weird to kind of just swivel on the hips. If you think about this character, the character's kind of center of mass would be kind of more right around this center control. So if it were to turn, it would probably kind of pivot around more of the center of the character rather than sort of the back toward the hips here. So what we can do to fix some of that is through this, I'm going to just start kind of translating the character back. Again, thinking about pivoting more off the center of mass of the character rather than directly on the hips. And then maybe translate it back a little bit too through these last couple frames, and maybe it can settle forward a little bit, but not quite that far. think that works a bit better. So here, maybe I'll translate it back a bit further on frame 27. I feel like I don't want to continue that much translation backward right there. All right, that's looking kind of halfway decent. Timing wise, it's getting to a place where I like it a bit more. Again, we have this slow action at the beginning to kind of a quick sort of whip over here. Something like that. Maybe I'll dial back the amount of rotation X right in there. That looks okay. Here I want to translate down a bit more, then come up. Maybe a tiny bit more, and then settle back down. Let me open up the graph editor, fix this block we're getting right there. Don't like this rotation that's happening right there. All right. Let me add a couple frames maybe toward this settle at the end. All right, so now what I'm going to do now that I'm at this position, I want to take all this animation off of this master control here. So what I'm going to do is select my root, select my 2 feet controls. I'm going to shift select that master control. I'm going to lock a keyframe down at the same position that I have on that master control. Let's bring our timeline down to 51 where it ends. Select my root, foot controls. I'm going to use this script, the world bake script. I'll make sure to link this in the description. I'll probably end up doing like a separate video, kind of just going over the different tools and stuff that I use. But this will just bake all that information to the actual locators. And then I can remove the animation on this master control here. Select the root. I'm going to go to bake from locators, bake that back down. So it's basically taking that locator information that we baked off, putting it back onto the controls. So we're getting this rotation and translation put on the actual controls themselves and baking it off of that master control that was handling all of that rotation. So now you can see we have the rotation happening in the translation for this turn 90 degrees, but we've taken it off that master control, which is what we want. All right, that kind of works there. Cool. So what I want to focus on real quick, getting the feet working a bit better. So copy the pose before. Maybe keep this one planted a bit longer. This one's probably going to start picking up maybe around frame 9. So I'm going to start picking it up. And let's see how this is going to look. I'm not sure how it will actually work, because I think the position it has to get into when completing the step is going to be too far away. Let me just copy this pose Let's say if I wanted to place it right around frame 19. Yeah, it's going to be probably too far back to work. So for this, what I'm going to do is do like a quick kind of adjustment step right here. So it brings the foot up. I can copy this pose. What I'm going to do is place it here and place it more forward. So the step on this one is much, much shorter. So it's kind of just a quick adjustment step. Maybe something like this. And then at the end, I'll probably do a final adjustment step, bringing this foot back into the idle position. So we have kind of like a quick adjustment there. And then the other foot comes around. So something like that. Obviously very rough. Let's get this other foot working. So on this, the knee is a bit broken. Let's see if I can get away with some rotation. Obviously the foot is going to be sliding, and really this foot should be kind of planted if all that weight is on it. But I think we can get away with getting a bit of sliding in there. And then here, maybe it picks up already. Kind of starts to make that transition over. And this one doesn't need to move quite as far to get into its idle position. So I think it just needs to do this one step, and then it will be in position there. This quick kind of adjustment step. We can make sure we copy all that information there. And I'm using Animbot to copy and use these different tools that it has to really speed up the process. Cool. Looking at this, it's way too fast. Right in here. I'm gonna go ahead and add a keyframe. This is a script I have to just add a frame there, and it's gonna shift all the keyframes down on my timeline. So it's just a quick way to do that. Probably add a keyframe here. I think that works a bit better. Add some frames to our timeline because we added some frames to the animation. All right, and I want to fix the root position through this. So through here, it's still going to be favoring that foot on the right because it's got all the weight on that foot. I think here it'll probably start to kind of dip down a little bit. Maybe not that far. We'll start to dip down, raise up, because that foot is picking up. Still favoring over on that right foot. It's dropping here. Maybe not quite that far. Here, and then it starts to swing back over. And then here, maybe I start to bring that hip back up. Maybe add a bit of rotation to this for this settle here. It's happening a bit too fast, this rotation that I'm getting. I'm going to open up my graph and just look at this in the graph editor. Maybe dial that back a bit. All right, let's fix this foot. It's going to pick up here. Something like that. See how that works. It's looking decent. Now I need to make sure it's locked off. It doesn't kind of float around there. Something like that. don't like how this shoots up that fast. It feels too much like a hop, which I don't want. So I'm going to reduce the amount it's actually moving up. And maybe here. Let me actually open up the graph to do some of this. Let me take a look at my translate, or excuse me, rotate X for some of this. Make sure I can still kind of see what I'm doing. For this, the hips are going to rotate down. So I'm going to grab this keyframe, start to rotate them down a bit. So here, rotates down, and then it's going to pop back up this direction, kind of how I have it. Then it's going to settle back down. Adds a bit of weight to it. And what I want to do from this top view, I'm going to start translating the whole body back, because it starts to move back when it actually completes the turn, which I want to start favoring it moving back earlier. So around frame 21, I already want to start bringing it backward. All right, let me take a look at the rotate Y here. I feel like it's rotating a bit too fast right in here. Let me add another frame to that. Maybe bring it down here just slightly. All right, we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I'm going to real quickly start animating the neck and the chest to get at least some movement in there. Again, we're working on a pretty tight time constraint for this. So right in here, let's add a keyframe, a couple different positions, start rotating the neck. Gonna try and look where it wants to turn before it actually commits to that turn. All right. And then it's gonna come forward here. And what I might actually try to do for this is jump forward, and right around frame 18, what I'm actually gonna try to do is straighten out the neck to feel a bit more like it's almost actually pulling with the neck and the head for this turn first, and then the body will kind of finish that turn. Maybe it'll actually like dip down like that. This is too fast right here, so I'm going to add some time. Let me animate the chest. Something a bit like that. Get maybe a bit of like tilt in the chest. This I feel like is now taking too long, so I'm going to remove some frames to this section. And now what I'm going to do is maybe do almost like a head shake. Head is kind of pulling over here. Maybe here it comes up. So it comes up, and then maybe here it'll actually whip around like that into like a quick. See how this is looking? Quick little head shake at the end. All right, that's kind of working a bit, but I want to get more of the chest involved in a lot of this. It starts to dip down. Too much right here. Delete that keyframe. Maybe a little bit too much on the head. All right, real quickly, I'm gonna do maybe a bit with the mouth. Maybe it turns, and then through here, let's try maybe like opening the mouth. Doing like a bit of kind of jaw, sort of roar animation through some of this. So it needs to close way faster, way earlier too. Maybe actually wait to open up. Let me copy this pose of the jaw, make sure I actually end in the correct pose there. So on this, let me actually look at it from this side view here. Yeah, we've got like a little bit of personality in there. Obviously, it's like just the head moving. just a little bit of chest. Let's maybe do a little bit of arm animation with the little time that we have left. Maybe here I'll drop the arm down. Something like this. I'm not quite sure how this is going to look. Maybe kind of tuck it in. You bring it up, down. Let's do the same for the right arm again. We've only got like a minute or so left. Haven't even gotten to the tail. But again, yeah, giving myself that 30-minute time constraint to see if I can get something that is halfway decent in a short amount of time. Actually, you need to copy this pose now. Paste it here to bring up that hand. This is going to be the last thing I actually have time for. So the hand comes up, maybe continues up, drops down. Like that arm drag we're getting on this right arm, I could probably even exaggerate that a bit more. Maybe offset the elbow from the upper arm. And I think that's actually time. So there's obviously a lot we need to fix and do on this. But really the goal here was to see if I could get something that I actually liked the feeling of, timing and spacing wise. And this is often how I'll approach an animation, is just kind of figuring out sort of the rough timing and kind of visualizing it in my head of kind of what I want the action to be, and then shifting my timing around in order to achieve that. So really the only thing we have animated and actually got to animating on this are the legs, the hips, a little bit of chest, and then the neck and the head, and then of course the arms that we just did. So there's definitely a lot to do. The tail isn't even animated. But again, the goal of this is to focus on getting to a decent place really quickly, and showing that by having a good solid workflow that you can always rely on will allow you to get really good results pretty quickly that you can then go to and actually start iterating on. So you can see that in 30 minutes, we got to this place. We have a turn 90 degrees in place. We have sort of rough timing that we want, and we have some personality in here. We have this cool kind of like roar to kind of finish it off as the dinosaur comes back to this settle. And something that I would probably really want to go in here and fine tune is this bad pop that we're getting on this translation. You can see that as he swings over, there's like this big hitch, stops, and then kind of starts. We want that to feel more like the head is turning and then almost pulling that over with the head, and then the rest of the body follows. So that's definitely something we would want to go in there and really fine tune that action. So hopefully you found this helpful. My plan is to do more of these type of kind of animation speed runs where I give myself a strict cutoff time of 30 minutes, can't go over that, and I have to kind of just step away and be happy with where I'm at. And honestly, at this stage of the animation, in 30 minutes, I have a really solid understanding of what this animation is actually going to look like. I can show it to somebody and get their feedback on if maybe this roar at the end is too much, maybe we want to go with something a bit more neutral, maybe the sort of held moment at the beginning with the head turning at first could be exaggerated even more, where that hold is even longer, where the dinosaur kind of looks and there's a longer hold and then he kind of pulls the rest of his body over. These are all questions I can get answers to with the animation at this state in just 30 minutes. So hopefully this was helpful for you. And as always, if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more content.